You know that specific montage you see in every biopic about a musician or a painter?
I know the one.
The one where they're like staring out a rainy window, looking all tortured but beautiful, sipping black coffee, and then bam,
The lightning bolt.
the lightning bolt hits, the music swells, they rush to the piano, and they just effortlessly bang out a masterpiece
Hmm.
in a single night. No crossing things out, no crying on the floor, just pure unadulterated flow.
It is a lovely image. I mean, it sells a lot of movie tickets.
Right.
And it is almost entirely fiction.
It has to be, right? But the problem is, I think a lot of us secretly believe that's how it works for the real geniuses.
Yeah.
We internalize this idea that if the work is hard, or if we're miserable doing it, we must be doing something wrong.
Exactly.
But the research we're looking at today just completely flips that script. We are doing a deep dive into the artist's struggle, embracing discomfort for creative breakthroughs. And honestly, reading this, it felt a bit like a personal attack.
It's definitely a reality check. The source material makes a pretty bold claim right out of the gate.
Which is?
For the vast majority of creators, reality isn't defined by flow states and muses. It's defined by uncertainty, genuine struggle, and deep, profound discomfort.
Which sounds incredibly depressing. Welcome to the creative life. You're going to be miserable.
Well, not quite. The mission of this deep dive isn't just to tell you that art is hard. We know that. The goal is to figure out how to use that difficulty.
Okay.
The central premise here is that we shouldn't be trying to escape the struggle. We should be leaning into it because the best work, the stuff that actually breaks new ground, usually lives on the other side of wanting to quit.
Okay, so let's get into the mechanics of this. The source introduces this concept of the creative discomfort zone. Now, usually when I hear discomfort zone, I think of, public speaking or cold showers. What does it mean here?
So the text defines it as a specific psychological and neurological space. It's that moment when an artist steps beyond their familiar neural pathways.
Their go-to moves.
Exactly. Their go-to techniques, their safe topics. And they enter a space of really high cognitive load. It's where you are confronting self-doubt and the fear of failure without a safety net.
So it's not just trying hard. It's specifically about being out of your depth.
Mm-hmm.
But here's my question. Why go there? If I'm a good writer or a good coder, why not just stay in my lane and produce high-quality work that I know I can pull off?
That is the million-dollar question. And the source argues that if you stay in that lane, you're just operating on pattern recognition. You're efficient, yes, but you aren't creating anything new.
Mm-hmm.
The document asserts that true originality requires risks that feel, and this is their word, destabilizing. It's a biological signal. If you aren't feeling that specific type of anxiety, you probably aren't learning, and you certainly aren't innovating.
So the anxiety is a feature, not a bug.
Exactly. It's the sensation of your brain trying to build a bridge to a place it hasn't been before.
Okay, I can buy that in theory. But in practice, discomfort is a pretty broad term. It can mean a lot of things. The source actually breaks this down into a taxonomy of suffering, which I found really helpful.
Yes.
I've been calling them the 4 horsemen of discomfort.
A dramatic, but I think very accurate title.
Yeah.
Yes, the table in the source outlines 4 specific sources of struggle. And what's fascinating is that each one hits you emotionally in a different way.
Let's run through these because I think identifying which horseman is attacking you is like half the battle. The first one is novelty.
Right. Novelty. This is a struggle of the beginner. It happens when you explore a new medium, a new style, or a subject matter you've never touched before.
This is the I have no idea what I'm doing phase.
Precisely. And the source describes the emotional fallout here as feeling technically inept or creatively lost. It's a massive blow to the ego.
Oh, yeah.
You might be a senior architect, but if you decide to try watercolor painting for the first time, your hand-eye coordination is that of a toddler.
And that drop in status is painful.
Yeah.
We spend our whole adult lives trying to be competent, but voluntarily becoming incompetent feels wrong.
It triggers a deep insecurity. The gap between your taste and your ability is just enormous in that novelty phase. Most people quit here because they confuse being new with being bad.
Okay, so that's
Yeah.
novelty. The second one is vulnerability. Now, this isn't about skill. This is about content.
Yes. Vulnerability is when you inject deeply personal emotions, secrets, or experiences into the work. You're removing the armor.
This is one that makes me want to crawl under the desk.
You and everyone else. The specific struggle here is the fear of judgment. But it's more specific than that. It's the fear of being misunderstood.
No, so?
Well, if you write a generic pop song and people hate it, they hate the song. If you write a song about your deepest trauma and people hate it, it feels like they hate you.
That's a huge distinction. It's so much safer to be ironic or cynical. When you're vulnerable, you're basically handing the audience a loaded gun.
Correct. But the source argues that without that risk, the work lacks resonance. It's just decoration.
All right, number 3 on our list of miseries. Constraint.
Constraint is structural, so we're talking about limits on time, materials, budget, or technology.
I feel like this is the most common complaint I hear from creative friends. I could make this amazing film if I just had a bigger budget, or I could write this book if I just had a month off work.
It's the externalization of the block. The source says the emotional result here is feeling suffocated. It leads to a very specific type of frustration where you feel like the universe is conspiring against your vision. You feel powerless.
Which brings us to the 4th one. And honestly, I think this is the most relatable one for anyone who has ever tried to make anything, ever. Incompleteness.
Yes.
The gap.
We've all heard Ira Glass talk about the gap, but how does the source frame it?
The source defines incompleteness as the specific psychological tension between the shiny, perfect vision in your head and the messy, flawed reality of what is actually on the page or canvas. This hits home. You have this glowing orb of perfection in your mind. It's a masterpiece. Then you try to get it out into the world, and it looks like, well, it looks like garbage. It's clunky. It's dull.
And that discrepancy causes actual distress.
Yeah.
The source notes that this specific struggle is the primary driver of project abandonment.
Right.
You look at the mess in front of you, you compare it to the perfection in your mind, and you conclude, I've ruined it. I'm not good enough to do this.
So just to recap, we have feeling inept from novelty, feeling exposed from vulnerability, feeling suffocated by constraint, and feeling like a failure because of incompleteness. That sounds absolutely miserable. Why would anyone sign up for this?
If you look at it that way, it does sound like masochism. But this raises the important question, how do we navigate it? The source moves from diagnosis to strategy.
Okay.
And this is where we get into the practical tools. The first big strategy is about reframing failure as feedback.
Okay, reframing failure sounds a little bit like a corporate poster from the 90s. Fail fast. How does the text actually apply this in a way that's, useful?
It starts by acknowledging that our discomfort usually stems from the fear of producing bad work. We freeze up because we treat every sentence or every brushstroke as a final verdict on our talent.
Right. If I write a bad sentence, it means I am a bad writer.
Exactly. The source argues for treating every attempt, even the catastrophic failures, as just data. It's about depersonalizing the process. You are a scientist running an experiment.
I like that.
If the test tube explodes, you don't cry about being a bad person. You record that that mixture was volatile.
I like the scientist analogy. But practically speaking, how do we actually do that?
The source gives us a really actionable tactic here called the messy goal.
I circled this part, but I have some skepticism. Walk us through it.
The instruction is to set a goal to create a series of pieces that are intentionally messy or experimental.
Okay, but playing devil's advocate here. I have a deadline. I have clients. I can't just hand in a mess and tell them it was a psychological experiment. How does this work in the real world?
That's a fair point. This isn't about the final deliverable. This is about the drafting phase. The strategy is to lower the barrier to entry for yourself.
Okay.
If you sit down to write the perfect proposal, you will procrastinate because the stakes are too high. If you sit down to write a garbage draft just to see what happens, you bypass the perfectionism.
So you're hacking your own psychology. If the goal is to be messy, then making a mess is technically a success.
Precisely. You get the wheels turning,
Yeah.
and usually buried in that mess, you find the kernel of the actual idea.
There was another tactic in this section about critiques that I found interesting. Usually when I show someone my work deep down, I just want them to tell me I'm a genius.
We all want the gold star.
I want the gold star.
It's human nature. But the source advises the exact opposite. It suggests scheduling a critique session with a mentor, but with a very specific rule.
And what's that?
The discussion should focus only on lessons learned from failed attempts.
Wait, only the failures. No good job.
No compliments allowed. The question isn't what looks good, it's what can we learn from the part that didn't work.
That sounds grueling.
It is, but it's efficient. Compliments feel good, but they don't teach you anything. Analyzing the wreckage tells you exactly where your structural weaknesses are. It forces you to extract value from the failure rather than just try to hide it.
It effectively turns you from a fragile performer into that scientist we mentioned.
Exactly.
Okay, let's move to the second major strategy. This one circles back to one of our 4 horsemen constraint. Before, we said constraints feel like suffocation, but now the source talks about productive
This
constraints.
is the paradox of creativity. We tend to think we want infinite freedom. We fantasize about having all the colors, all the time in the world, the biggest budget.
A blank page.
Right. But the source explains that infinite possibilities actually lead to cognitive paralysis. It's the paradox of choice. When you can do anything, your brain is overwhelmed by the sheer number of decisions it has to make. It just shuts down.
So limits are actually helpful.
Limits act as a scaffold. They reduce the number of variables so your brain can actually focus on problem solving. The source calls this imposing limitations to spark creativity.
Can we look at the specific examples? The text lists. Because some of these seemed almost too simple to work.
Let's look at the color palette one. The source suggests limiting yourself to exactly 3 colors for a week.
See, that sounds like a fun exercise for a kindergarten class. How does that help a serious artist?
It forces depth over breadth.
Right.
If you only have red, black, and white, and you need to convey a mood of serenity, you can't just reach for the blue paint.
Right.
You have to figure out how to manipulate line, texture, and negative space to create that feeling. You have to master the tools you do have.
So the restriction forces you to get clever.
Exactly. Another example they give is forcing the project to be completed in a totally new location.
Like writing in a coffee shop instead of your office.
Or a park bench, or the back seat of a car. It breaks the associative triggers. If you always sit at the same desk, your brain goes into autopilot. New environment, new neural pathways.
Right.
It's a constraint because you don't have your usual comforts or tools right there within arm's reach.
And there was one more about materials that I loved.
Yes, using only found materials. The source references a materials list file, implying you should look around your immediate environment right now, staplers, coffee stains, old receipts, and create with what is already there.
It's very Apollo 13. You have to fix the CO2 filter with a sock and some duct tape.
Ideally with better aesthetic results, but yes, the principle is identical. By removing the option to buy the perfect solution, you force your brain to invent one.
So we've got reframing failure as data, and we've got using constraints to stop paralysis. But here's where I want to push back a little. Strategies are great when you have energy, but what about when you're just exhausted? What about when the inspiration tank is completely empty and you hate everything?
This leads us to the third strategy, and probably the most unglamorous one, mindful persistence.
Mindful persistence. That sounds a lot like just keep grinding, which is advice I'm kind of sick of hearing.
It's nuanced, though. The source starts by aggressively dispelling that instant myth. It reiterates that breakthroughs are rarely these instantaneous flashes. They are the cumulative results of sustained effort, specifically during those low inspiration periods.
It's easy to work when you're manic with excitement. It's hard to work when you're just bored.
And boredom is the enemy here. That is why the source proposes the 30-minute rule.
Is 30 minutes enough, though? We're talking about breakthroughs. Can you really achieve greatness in a sitcom-length window?
It's not about the output volume. It's about the consistency of the neural firing. The rule is a commitment to a daily creative session of at least 30 minutes, regardless of whether the artist feels inspired.
Regardless of inspiration. That's the kicker.
It is. You show up, you put in the 30 minutes. Even if you just stare at the page or make bad marks or write nonsense, you are building the discipline. You are telling your brain that this is a non-negotiable part of your existence, like brushing your teeth.
It creates a container for the muse to show up eventually.
Precisely. And to support this, the source emphasizes documentation, but not just sketching ideas. It suggests keeping a dedicated journal to document daily struggles and small victories.
I understand recording the victories, but why write down the struggles? Why would I want to remember that today I stared at the wall and felt like a fraud?
Because it creates a record of resilience. When you hit a block 3 months from now, you can look back and see, oh, I felt exactly this way in January and I got through it. It objectifies the emotions so you aren't drowning in it. It proves that the struggle is temporary.
That's actually really powerful. It's evidence against your own despair.
Exactly. Now, there is one final rule in this section, and honestly, it's my favorite because it addresses the isolation of art. It's the no quitting rule.
This one sounded intense. Lay it out for us.
The rule states, you are not allowed to quit a current work in progress until you have discussed the specific block with a trusted colleague.
So you can't just rage quit in the middle of the night when you hate yourself.
No. You can quit, eventually, perhaps, but you cannot quit alone in the heat of the moment. You have to articulate the specific block to someone else first.
Why is that social aspect so critical? Why can't I just decide for myself?
Because in the heat of the moment, your brain is lying to you. You are likely in the grip of one of the four horsemen, maybe incompleteness or vulnerability. Your perspective is distorted.
So you need a second pair of eyes to say, hey, you aren't failing, you're just in the messy middle.
Exactly. Usually, a trusted colleague will be able to see the potential that you are currently blind to. It prevents temporary emotion from destroying long-term progress.
It's a safety valve. I like that. So let's zoom out for a second. We've looked at the discomfort zone, the specific types of pain like novelty and the gap, and we've discussed strategies like messy goals and constraints. What is the big takeaway here?
I think the core philosophy is a massive shift in how we view the artist's life. We are culturally conditioned to think that struggle is a sign of weakness. We think if I was really talented, this would be easy.
Mozart didn't struggle, so why am I?
Right, but the source is saying the exact opposite. The struggle is not evidence of a lack of talent. It is evidence that you are pushing boundaries. It is evidence that you are aiming for work that matters.
Hmm.
If it were easy, you wouldn't be in the creative discomfort zone and you wouldn't be doing anything original.
That is a relief to hear, but it doesn't make the process any less painful.
No, but it gives the pain a purpose. The goal isn't to make the struggle go away. The goal is to realize that the journey through the struggle is the work. The friction is where the heat comes from.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, we want to leave you with a thought to mull over. We talked a lot about incompleteness, that painful gap between your perfect vision and your messy reality.
It's the moment most people quit. It's the valley of death for ideas.
Right. But ask yourself this. If that gap is the most painful part of the process, and if that pain comes from stretching your abilities to their absolute limit, is it possible that the moment you most want to quit is actually the surest sign that you are just about to have a breakthrough?
It's something to think about the next time you're staring at a blank page and hate everything you see.
Thanks for diving in with us. Now go make a mess.
See you next time.